Welcome to the space between, a place to pause with quieter moments. I'm Julie, and thanks for spending this time with me. When people hear my story, they sometimes ask, how did I find the strength to begin again? And I don't think it happened all at once. It happened quietly, one ordinary day at a time. In the months and years following my car accident, I began to sense that my journey wasn't simply about recovery. It was about creating a new life. Instead of asking, why has this happened to me? I found myself asking different questions. Who am I now? What's my purpose? These questions didn't need immediate answers. They simply invited me to become curious about the person I was becoming. Books became my faithful companions on that journey. I found comfort in The Artist's Way, The Power of Now, and The Secrets of the Lost Mode of Prayer. Each one gently encouraged me to slow down, to stop living in yesterday or tomorrow, to discover the gift of being present. Before my accident, I was always planning ahead. Now I was learning to notice this moment, this breath. One of the simplest practices I created became the most powerful for me. I called it my tea meditation. I think I probably read it in a book somewhere. It wasn't complicated. I choose a really nice tea and boil the kettle on the gas stove and hold the warm cup in my hands. I notice its warmth, its aroma. I'd savour each sip instead of rushing through it. And in those quiet moments, something shifted in me. For a little while, I wasn't thinking about my injuries. I wasn't worrying about tomorrow. I was simply here. Those cups of tea became little moments of healing. They reminded me that life wasn't on hold. Life was still happening. Another practice I loved came from The Artist's Way. Julia Cameron calls them artist dates. I take myself off somewhere nice, maybe a quiet cafe, a walk along the beach, or just sitting in nature. Because I couldn't work, I suddenly had time. At first, I saw this as something I had lost, but eventually I began to see it differently. It gave me the opportunity to reconnect with myself. Meditation became part of every day, not because I expected it to cure me, but because it gave me somewhere to rest, somewhere to be. When I became still, something remarkable happened. The pain softened, not because it had disappeared, but because my whole nervous system began to settle. Meditation became the foundation of my recovery. Everything else seemed to flow from there. Another lesson arrived in a way I never expected. Forgiveness. One of the exercises in The Secrets of the Lost Mode of Prayer encouraged me to forgive. Eventually, I forgave the woman whose car had crashed into mine. Not because what happened didn't matter. It mattered greatly. But I realised forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about me. It allowed me to put down a weight I'd been carrying for far too long. And as my confidence slowly returned, I joined the local Fit for Life group. I couldn't run, not yet. So I asked if I could simply walk while everybody else ran. And every step I took gave me a feeling of recovery, perhaps more slowly than I'd once imagined, but recovery all the same. Then one day, my husband came home with an unusual gift, unusual to me anyway. It was a message in a bottle, a message in a glass bottle. And inside there were instructions to write your wish, place it in the bottle, and set it free on the sea. I remember standing on one of my favourite beaches. The waves were gentle, the sea was calm. I wrote my wish for healing. I sealed the bottle, placed it gently into the water, and watched it slowly drift away. I don't think the bottle carried my wish. I think it carried away my fear. And as I was driving home, something happened that I still can't quite explain. I had a really strong feeling, a quiet but persistent instinct to stop at the home of people I knew. We weren't really close. In fact, I remember thinking, why am I stopping here? But the feeling was so strong, I couldn't ignore it. So I turned the car into their drive. I knocked on the door. And when the lady answered, she looked really surprised to see me. And for a moment, I thought, oh, have I called at the wrong time? Then she smiled and said, Julie, this is really strange. My husband has been talking about you for a while. He's a phone number of somebody he thinks could help you. I stood there, speechless. She handed me the number. It belonged to a physical therapist in the UK. I rang her and explained my injuries. She listened carefully before saying, Julie, I'm sorry, your injuries are too complex for me, but I know somebody who can help you. She gave me another telephone number, and this time it belonged to a neurologist in Moscow. I made the call. That single phone call eventually led me to a doctor whose treatment became an important part of my recovery over the next few years. And sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had ignored the feeling, if I had simply driven home. I'll never know. But that day taught me something I've never forgotten. Sometimes our intuition whispers before our minds understand. From that moment on, I began paying attention to those quiet nudges. The more I listened, the stronger they became. Little by little, my identity was no longer tied to the life I had before the accident. Neither was it tied to my injuries. It became rooted in possibility. Recovery wasn't one dramatic breakthrough. It was hundreds of tiny decisions. Choosing hope, making tea, walking, meditating, reading, forgiving, listening, trusting. One ordinary day after another, and somewhere along the way, I realised I wasn't simply recovering. I was coming home to myself. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, take good care of yourself.